So at the center of the work we do is working with young people. But at the same time, we ensure that our work espouses work around policy influence. Currently, we've been involved in work, particularly with Africa Forward, around the social solidarity economy. And the idea for that, for South Africa, is to push for the social solidarity economy to move from the green paper stage into a white paper so that eventually we could see this policy come into action. But it would mean that, moving that is not just going to be moving it at the state at which it is. It's going to require another round of involvement and engagement with our partners, with young people, with social innovators, with social entrepreneurs, to shape it and see if it fits and it speaks to the needs that are emerging at the moment. So that's one element of our work. The second element is around ecosystem development. We want to be able to make sure that we have as many young people whose work is connected. Because one of the biggest challenges that we find in the movement or in the ecosystem is fragmentation. Everyone is doing so many amazing pieces of work, but there isn't any sort of a unifier that brings it all together. And our work as Catalyst Now South Africa is to make sure that in as much as we bridge the divide, we bring together some of these initiatives so that we can have much more influence, be it in terms of financing, be it in terms of philanthropy, be it in terms of impact investing. We are then able to approach those who are willing to fund the kind of work to say, these are the emerging needs that we have, and this is how you can best leverage the opportunities to help us scale up. But also to make sure that there's equal representation of young people at spaces that are often very much far ahead, where young people are excluded, and make sure that their voices are heard. And that's exactly what one has been doing here at the Africa Forward Summit, to make sure that we represent the voices that are not here, the voices that are at the ground level. And we call it ground level, but that are on the ground doing the work, while we are here busy influencing policies that will eventually affect them. So that's the kind of work that we're involved in. Yeah. So first and foremost, I think a platform like what Africa Forward has created in terms of the summit is amazing. I was involved in the first Africa Forward convening that took place in Naivasha, and in Naivasha, Kenya. And the idea that we had at the time of what we wanted Africa Forward to be, today I can say was almost realized. There's still a lot of work because we came together as various chapter members of Catalyst Now from different countries. All 54 states were represented. And the idea was we work particularly in what they call the informal economy. We're social entrepreneurs. And there are markets and opportunities that exist. But how can we influence policy at continental level? And in order to do that, we would need a mother body that represents us in the continent, that speaks our voices, but that are also able to create the kind of pathways that could influence the trade that could happen amongst ourselves in the country. And in principle, the mandate of what Africa Forward was to create such platforms that would bring together dynamic people that are interested in the movement, but that are also doing work in the sector, so that we are able to create platforms for conversations, for policy influence, for innovation, so that the work can drive to the kind of change that we want, but most importantly, to involve government, because it is the very administrative body that is responsible for making sure that movements or ecosystems such as the social innovation movement or social innovators or even entrepreneurs scale up or exist and are protected. So this week has been a lot more inspirational, but I think for me the biggest take is not just in inspiration, is in ensuring that we follow up on the tasks that needs to happen, The biggest pull was to ensure that we leverage opportunities from the G20, which is predominantly around policy work. But what happens post G20? We need to make sure that all these commitments that have been done and all this drive and energy that we've been pulling in influencing policy, in having conversations with government, with the private sector, with investors, with even the ground forces, to ensure that the work continues. In 2 weeks' time, a process that culminated in all this work that we are finding being discussed right now will be handed over to the US. And now the work comes back to us as social entrepreneurs to ensure that we probe government and keep them on their toes to say, these are the commitments that you made and these are the commitments that we need to take forward. So, and I'm particularly excited representing the South Africa chapter, ensuring that in the many conversations leading up to this one, we ensured that the voices of other social entrepreneurs from other regional partners from other countries were also represented, because in many ways we do share some of the struggles. And fortunately, we have now the African Union that also is another member of the G20. And on that body, it means that there is direct representation, even at continental level, where we could go back and say, you've accounted to this, you've accounted to this, this is what we want. So the work that we've been doing with the social solidarity economy, particularly in South Africa, around pushing for that green paper to be moved, this is the opportunity for that, as from January, to ensure that the government, particularly the Department of Trade and Industry, moves on it, because they are the ones that are sitting with the policy at the moment. So that's when the real work will happen. Trust has been built, but it's also a responsibility on both ends to ensure that trust is not fractured. With government, with the private entities, with corporates, we've been able to have amazing conversations, including academic institutions, to say we've now prototyped this car. How about we make sure that it scales up and it moves? And it can then come back to us, because we are literally at the bottom end of it. We require the resources, and the government holds the policy work, they hold the processes, and in some instances they hold the money. The private entities are responsible for ensuring that our communities are developed, but we've also urged them to say, we know the kind of work that is involved, in as far as we are coming up with those solutions. It's important that you listen to us. When we speak localization, avoid just using jargons because it's a fascinating word that speaks to your needs. When we speak impact, it's because we know that when we say we need young people, particularly those with physical disabilities, to be on wheelchairs, we have hundreds of them on wheelchairs, but it's not just the impact of having had them have 100 chairs, but it's also to ensure that in them being able to have access, there's movement, there's some sort of productivity that happens, because there is an empowerment that happens when a person, particularly living with physical disabilities who cannot walk, is able to move. Because in that way, they're able to develop in the right way, they're able to grow equally with people who may have all the other abilities. They're able to equally also contribute to society in the same way that any other average person in society can.